Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another interview. And here with me, I have Hakim Isler. Is that right? Am I
Yes,
pronouncing that
ma'am.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm really happy to meet you and excited to learn about all you're doing. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about your background as a child.
Yes, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and then I eventually moved to New Brunswick, New Jersey, and stayed there in New Brunswick until I was in my 20s, my early 20s, and I came up with this idea based on some really unique circumstances that I wanted to dedicate my life to martial arts.
Wow.
Um, and I wanted to find an art that was well-rounded and had a lot of different aspects, including like the metaphysical aspect and things. And I found out about this ninja martial arts, which was which the first American to go to Japan and actually bring that back to America was this guy who was living in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
So I went there to visit his school and fell in love with it and was like, this is where I need to be. This is what I got to do. So I came back and kissed my mom on the cheek and told her, hey, I'm going to go train with this ninja guy to be a ninja at like 20. And
I'm sure,
everybody thought I was nuts. They were
I'm sure
like,
your
oh my
mom thought you
goodness.
were nuts.
Yeah, so she actually, what was really unique about the story is that she was in shock and she was like, look, when you were 9, you can my aunt, your aunt and me, we both asked you what you wanted to be when you grow up, and you said you wanted to be a ninja. And we thought that was just the most funniest thing, and we didn't want to break your heart and tell you it was no such thing. But she was like, now here you are at 21, and you came back to me and you're telling me that you're about to go move to Ohio where you have no friends and no family to become a ninja. What are you talking about? Like this is mind blowing, and so that's what I did. I spent the next year saving up $1,200, which, isn't much by anybody's standard. Found a little rinky dink apartment in the ghetto of Dayton, Ohio, and moved there and started my life on this quest to become a ninja and trained with this master there. And I've been training with him ever since for about 25 years now.
Okay, well, let's come back to your master. I want to go back a little bit and I want you to kind of narrow in on this idea of you wanting to be a ninja when you're a child. And
Yeah.
what exactly events happened to drive you to truly become a ninja? Because most people say, I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is, but they never become it. So,
Yeah. So for me, it was, there was, all of cartoons and things of that nature. You had like G.I. Joe and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all these different characters. But the ninja kind of represented this like, this well-rounded, very adaptive individual who was out there doing things in a way that was difficult for people to understand how they were accomplishing these feats. And I
right,
think for me as a young man, that really appealed to me. I had a very strong imagination. And then this mystical aspect, the ninja could do things, spiritually and energetically that was just seen as, very unique. And so I liked all of that, and so to me, that was like this kind of really cool superhero, that
right.
blended all this stuff together. And that's what really I think appealed to me at that young age. I had several events as a young man, where these mystical events where I had one point dreamt the lottery numbers and I told my mom and she played them locally, but they came out nationally, and which would have
Right.
been more money. We would have made, we would have made millions. We'd be millionaires right now if she had played it nationally. Um, I had seen several different things in dreams that I had told her about that had come true. There were so many different, I had also avoided some really dangerous situations through having certain instincts and moving and listening to those instincts. And so I think I was always kind of on that path, even though I didn't really know what that meant as a
Right.
young man, you know.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so now we're 21 and you're off to go train with your master. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so I actually it took me a year or so to save up the money to go out there, and so it
Right.
was more like by the time I got out there, I was like 22 or 23. Um, but I held on that whole time. Like, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna work all these jobs. I'm gonna save up money. Every little penny I can to like, to get out there, and I'm gonna plan and do this thing the right way. And so then I get to Ohio, and the thing I didn't tell you is that I had in my mind, reading my teacher's books, that they were going to be out in the woods, black cladded
Yeah,
ninja running
right.
around and doing all this, eating off the land and doing
Right.
all this stuff. And when I got there, they were in like a shopping center, like in the suburb of Centerville, Ohio.
Right.
And I was like, what is this? So I went inside, talked to some of the instructors there, and then talked to my teacher. And there was other things going on that were not the forefront. The way he kind of developed a new system in which he was focused more on giving this knowledge and this information and these skills to the average everyday person,
Right.
and not so much the kid like me that was coming with this kind of like really esoteric, drive that I wanted to become this thing. Um, and so when I got there, there was still that. But what I found really quickly was that there was a small group of individuals that were training there. All had very similar stories to mine. They had found out about my teacher and they moved there to train. That he was training privately at his house or with different special training
Oh,
events. And so then I started to, they very early on identified me as an individual who was there for the depth and the breadth of what we were offering or what he was offering. And so I started training with him at his house, and we started doing all these different trainings that delve deep into the ninja mindset and the
so
ninja training.
so before you tell me who this master is, was there like a prerequisite that you would train at his house versus at the mall, or was there certain things you had to get through before that, or did you have to be initiated?
I think so the ninja and my teacher is a ninja, and it's very, it's very tricky and sometimes very weird for us in the American culture. I think those initiations and those what they would screening would happen in a very low profile way where you watch the individual, you see how they respond to certain things that are happening in their life, you talk to them, you see how they respond to certain things when you talk to them. And I think that was the process.
Right,
It wasn't like, hey, show up here at this time and
right, got
then whatever. It was more like, how are you holding up? What's your integrity like when people aren't watching, or when you think people aren't watching? What's really happening in your life? And I think that's what really happened, because I can't even pinpoint a time. Like, there was no come here at 6 o'clock and then
yeah,
there,
right.
come into the back room like there's some golden ticket somewhere hiding, and then I show up somewhere and they try to beat me up, and then I survive. And so they say, yeah, you're going to be in now. It was more like one day I just found myself kind of being invited to these things, and I was like, whoa, and I would show
You
up and it would just be me and a handful of people. And these were all my seniors. So I'm like this young person who's a junior in this art, but I'm with all of these people who had been, not all, it was only like 9 or maybe 12 of us, but it was like small group of people, and some of them had been there for a long time. So I was just like, wow, this is really cool. How did I find myself here amongst these folks? And I think that's something that I do for my students now, is that it's not about what you tell me as much as it's about what you show me in your life and how your life plays out, and
That's
and
right.
and how you're able to take the lessons and apply the lessons in your everyday world. if I start seeing that, then I'm more apt to provide or offer more information to you about certain things than I am about to just anybody, you know? So,
So,
yeah.
okay. So, the general view or the general perception of somebody who hears the word ninja is, I don't know, like you said, black outfit, black mask, knives and so is it really like that, or is it something different, or is there a story behind the dress and the attire, and maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
That's a beautiful question. Not a lot of people really ask that. They just kind of assume that that is what it is. So the ninja were very layered and deep characters in old Japan, Japanese history, and so they were these wilderness people, and who lived in small villages up in the mountains, and their primary focus was survival in the wilderness, but then all in family and community, but then also enlightenment. They had quite a few different types of spiritual individuals who would come through these small villages, and then they would work towards oneness with nature and things of that nature. But the culture of Japan at the time, as with a lot of different countries and places, was that, hey, if the people in power, you do what they say, and you follow their rules and their guidance, and
Right.
having a weird group of people up in the mountain, that you don't know what they're doing, but you hear they're very powerful and they're diving deep into these very powerful lessons. That's kind of scary because they're a wild card and they can come and try to take over your power, or thwart your efforts. So the culture didn't like that. They would counter the culture. And so the people in power started to kind of like try to oppress these people and hold them down, and like get them out of the woods and take them out. And so then these small villages realized very early that they were going to have to develop a means of protection. How do we protect ourselves from these individuals? And their power and their strength, they found, was not in their cookie cutter, like everybody does the same thing and looks the same way, but their power and their strength was in the fact that they looked, and they were nature. They were individuals who had different looks to them, who liked different things, who had an understanding of psychology and how people operated. And so they were like, well, let's use that. And so they would gather information and intel, and their art of invisibility, as a lot of people hear ninja and the art of invisibility, was really me knowing where to be and where not to be to make sure that me and my family stay safe. Right. And the way we do that is we gather intelligence from, the communities. And the way they would do that was that they would send people down. So your fisherman in your village that has been there for a long time, you're thinking that that guy is just a fisherman, but no, he's a ninja. Or the shopkeeper or the innkeeper, oh, that's a ninja. Or the heavy set homeless guy, I don't know what the equivalent, or
Right.
roaming individual there
Right.
would be a ninja. Everybody could be a ninja, and that's what their strength was. And so the word ninja actually means one who endures, one who perseveres, or it could also translate into one who is stealthy. Ninjutsu, which is their method, is one who endures, one who perseveres, or one who is stealthy. And so what I tell people today as I teach in my schools is if you've ever endured any hardship in your life, then technically by definition you are a
A
ninja, right?
ninja.
But what makes the ninja from Japan a little bit different was that they had these practices that allowed them to really understand who they were and how to deal with these different hardships. And so that would be the only. So I always tell people, you're already a ninja if you've endured anything. Now we just have to, basically initiate you and teach you the methodology of the ninja that they use to help them overcome these challenges. And so that's really what the ninja were about.
Right.
Um, and because
Not a
they
ninja
operate,
then.
Yeah, yeah. And because they operated in this scheme of totality, so everything, so like the samurai at the time had a Bushido code and everything had to be real strict and they were all about, honor and dying on the battlefield. And the ninja were like, no, no, no. We just want to keep our family safe and we want to be able to do our thing in our villages. So we have a different view of how to operate in the world, and we're not about showboating or being the
Right.
best and all this. We just want to survive. So whatever we need to do to survive, that's going to be the thing that we take advantage of. So
So as a ninja, then were they so worried about safety that they had to, learn ways of dealing with combat and those things that they would have to defend themselves in?
yeah, so they weren't necessarily, I wouldn't say worried about safety, but they learned combat because they knew that they might have to defend themselves physically. But ultimately, their goal was not to get into
Right,
like physical confrontation because there
right,
were
right.
so few of them. So if you have overwhelming forces, 20, 30,000 people, you can lose 10,000 or 5,000 and still you're okay. You still got a
Right.
pretty big force, right? But if you're only like 300 people living in a village, then you can't afford to go out there fighting,
You're right, right,
and lose
right,
somebody. So their goal was like, hey, we need to try to either find the weaknesses to help our enemies or our opponents kind of destroy themselves, with their, or just not be where they expect us to be, and so that was their primary focus. So they were like clandestine espionage artists of the modern day, but they were back then,
right,
like they weren't trying to fight, they were trying to gather intel and figure out a way to allow the enemy to destroy themselves, fight
right.
themselves. So,
So, okay, let's talk a little about you and your relationship with your master and your relationship with your peers and a little bit about that.
yeah. Yeah. So, my teacher, Stephen Hayes, is a very incredible gentleman. And, he has done a lot of really amazing things, and my relationship with him is, in my opinion, good. He's a ninja, so he has different ways of looking at things, and I always am. Well, me and some of my peers are always trying to figure out what that looks like and things of that nature. But this man has contributed to my life in a way that everything that I have now is a culmination of not just where I grew up, but me following this ninja quest. Even to the things that I'm doing now with like the Psi Games and all that stuff, it's really me still following through with the ninja had these 9 powers, these 9 abilities, and me really understanding what that looks like in a modern perspective
Right.
and diving deep into that. And so, I recently, about 2 years ago, got my 6th degree black belt under him. And actively, right now, on his wall, there's probably about 6 or 7 of us at his home dojo that he has, in this, that are active, that are 6th degree black belts. And then it just gets smaller. The number gets smaller as you go up. And that's a huge step for a 9-year-old boy to say, I want to be a ninja, to the point where he forgot about it, to at 21, it comes back around. And I'm like, this is what I want to do, to moving out there. And then like 25 years later, being standing in your teacher's dojo at his house and he promoting you to a small little group of people of like 6
Right.
as a 6th degree black belt. It was a huge, huge accomplishment. And I'm still training to this day, and I will be for the rest of my life. So, um, our relationship is very good. And as I was coming up, when I actually lived in Ohio, I spent a lot of time there and a lot of time training with him and his family, and getting to know them and to grow with them, and them add so much to my life. I'll always be grateful for the rest of my life.
It's amazing. That's amazing. That relationship that you have with someone like that is so precious. Okay, so tell us a little bit. You mentioned nine properties that a ninja tries to acquire or learns about. Can you speak a little bit about those?
Yeah, so the ninja had, because there were so many different cultures that would kind of be roaming around in the mountains of Japan. Like you had refugees from China, and you had, different holy men and things that were up there. These Yamabushi mountain warriors. They started to culminate these different methodologies of gaining power through practice and experiential practice in nature. And so you have cultures like Shugendo, you had all these different practices that were happening there. So the ninja started to say, well, how do we bring forth these strengths or these abilities when we need them to help us solve or overcome certain challenges? And so there were 9 abilities or 9 powers that they developed in this thing called the Kuji. And there's these mudras and mantras that you can say,
Oh, wow.
these mudras you can do and mantras you can say, these magic words to kind of bring forth these different feelings or these different experiences that allows you to deal with something that is akin to that in that particular time. And this could be like strength, this could be like healing, this could be one of the abilities is what we know now as remote viewing, seeing in another time and
Right.
place.
That's
Another one would be what people are so keen on now, which is manifestation,
right.
the ability to have almost this weird control over your environment where you can bring things into existence through a certain level of your own will, both spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So another one would be like sensing danger or intention or what we call gut feelings or intuition, really locking that in. And so, yeah, you would move through these 9. And then there was kind of a grid pattern that you could do to help you call these forth in a very summarized version. And then with this 10th movement, you would push that out into the world, and a ninja might use all 9 of those, or just maybe one at a particular time that they might need it. And I think we can attribute this in American society to, you might have a fist where you're on a team and or you're looking at a family member and they can't hear you and you want them to feel courage or feel good, so you put your fist up to them on the bat on the football
Right.
field or whatever,
Right.
and they're like, yeah, that feels great, and they get that feeling of
Right. Right.
of
Just from that gesture.
gesture. Yeah. And so we have these means of being able to bring about that in our own personal everyday lives, just as individuals, when you feel good and somebody wants to know if you're okay, you might give them the thumbs up, right?
Hmm.
Or if somebody does good and they're at a distance and you give them the thumbs up. If you're a father doing that to a daughter or a son, that makes them feel pretty good inside,
Yes, absolutely.
and so it changes the dynamic of their own energy with just like a little gesture. And so, the ninja were masters of this and was able to use this to their advantage when they had to go out and do some really hard work in the world.
So, okay, so can we go through the 9 and can you talk a little bit about each one of them very briefly?
I can. There are a lot, and I haven't mastered all of them, so I wouldn't want to do a disservice with based on my teacher, who actually is a priest and actually
Yes.
does that thing. So I would say that I can give you a brief summary, but
Yes, of
I
course.
really I'd really rather him be the guy who dives deep into that, because I don't want to
No.
in any way downshoot that. But you have like, Ren, you have the strength, you have Ren, Kyoto, Kai, Zai, Zen, Retsu, Kai, and Zen, I believe it is,
Right.
and each one of these abilities, like this strength, moving from that strength to more of an internal strength in health and sciences, moving past that to you being able to understand healing and healing modalities, moving past that into kind of really understanding how the world moves and how you can move in the world, seeing people and seeing and being able to read things about those people, moving past that onto how do I sense when danger is happening, and how do I know when my environment's not safe.
Right.
Moving beyond that to like this remote viewing kind of ability where I'm actually like the sixth ability where I'm actually like in an ESP almost type mode where I'm actually seeing or perceiving things that may not be here.
Right.
Moving past that to more of a how do I really start to engage with those things and see what like the mind and eyes of God they would sometimes say, where um, God or the mind and eyes of God sees everything as part of the scheme of totality and how all these things fit together. And then moving beyond that to now I see how these things fit together. What about how I influence those things and can bring those things about and into the world and into this through like manifestation. And
Right.
then how do I take all of that and put it in a cave and protect it, and keep it so that I am, even though I'm walking throughout the world, I'm like kind of in this cave and I'm protected by that as I move through the world with this kind of really strong aura, a bubble around me.
Right.
And how do I project that out into the world would be like the final stage of that. So, I hope that does it justice, because
Wow.
they're really deep and
Right.
it'll
I
take a
can
lot
imagine.
longer than what we have to go through it all.
Absolutely, I can imagine. But just the idea that you broke it down into what they are and that they kind of build on each other so that you can't really move from one to the other until you've sort of mastered the one, correct?
Not necessarily. They're
Oh,
not necessarily linear as much as they, or at least through my understanding, as much as they could be. They're more like a sphere, or they're
oh,
like
wow.
it's more bubble or circular. And you could touch one, like maybe you're just born with the gift of intuition.
Mhm.
So if you're born with that natural gift, you didn't have to go through one strength and and all
Right,
these
right, right, right.
and start building from there. You just already have it. So
Right,
those may help you strengthen that ability. Yeah, of course, if you are more grounded and and strong physically, emotionally, and mentally, then you have a strong anchor for what it feels like to go through the world and be intuitive and sense things and feel things that can be really disruptive if you don't have that type of grounding, you
correct.
know. So I'm sure you may have met in your path. Sometimes people can be very intuitive, but because they have no grounding, they're almost their own worst enemy.
Right,
They feel it and then they go over here and they go over there and they're not really sure where they should be because they feel all of this energy and stuff coming off of people. And so it
right,
takes so in that case, going back to number one,
right,
Ren, and then getting grounded and strong from probably will be of benefit. So you started in the middle, but then you're going to that number one.
right,
Um, so they could kind of morph and you could kind of learn them as maybe your teacher might see or your guide might see that you might need to start in this particular place. And I tell my students that all the time. We have another thing about ninjutsu in our training, we have 5 elemental manifestations. And so we have earth, wind, fire, water, and void, right? And so these manifestations, and what happens sometimes is, as a personality, we may have one or two of these that we kind of fluctuate in between. Now, at different points in our life and how we connect with different people, we might end up falling into one or the other because maybe I'm naturally earth, but when I'm around this person, I feel very like they make me feel very excited and I want to explore and stuff, which isn't normally my nature, but just this one person brings that out of me. So I might transition. However, most of the time I might be a very earth person, and most of the time this person over here might be a very fiery person, and so but they can drift into these others. And so I'm saying that and connecting that to the 9 because sometimes you may have one that you really connect with or resonates with you, but as a teacher, your teacher or the guide that you have helping you with understand this will say, hey, well, you already got that one. we need to really work on this other one. And
Right.
I have that conversation with a lot of my students all the time,
Right.
where I have people who come in who are super earth, and I might promote them pretty fast through that element. And they're like, well, I didn't learn all the techniques. And I'm like, yeah, but what you need to know for earth, you really have it. So we're going to move you on to this water thing. And then they struggle with water and they're like, I can't get this movement. I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, exactly. We want you to work on the thing you're not so, that isn't your thing and that you haven't been doing all the time, because that is how you become well-rounded. And
Right.
that's what the ninja needed. The ninja needed to be able to move through multiple environments and be whatever was the most supportive in that environment, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so that is one of the powers of our training, is that we don't say, hey, this is the way you are, just do that. And just that's that. And anyone who doesn't get along with that, you cut them out of your life. It's like, hey, well, maybe this energy in this room right now with these people, everybody's flighty and they're nervous and they're scared about something that's going down. They need an earth person. And normally I'm not an earth person, but right now I see that the room needs that. And
Right.
because I've been training and I had a good teacher and that teacher taught me about earth and how to be it convincingly, I can be the anchor, even though I'm normally not the anchor. I know how to become that for this instance. And that's one of the powers that we really focus on, is how can you move through these different elements and these different abilities as you start to recognize that they're needed in the world.
So can you then just give us a brief overview of the elements and what they represent?
Yeah, so each element, so you got earth, water, fire, wind, and void. And again, that's more of a circular sphere than it is like going from one to another. At our school, we actually teach it one to another because just people understand that better than saying, hey, here's a bubble. When you come to class, you might be in this one or that, like
Right. Right.
based on how you're feeling on the day. That would be pretty
Right.
confusing. So we want to give them a place to start and we grow from there. So each element has a method of thinking, has a method of feeling and being in the world, has a method of strategy, has a method of, even if you want to go that far, depending on what your belief system is, has a spiritual aspect to it. And just to make it really simple, at the base level at our schools, we say, hey, earth element, the positive earth characteristics for a personality would be confidence. How do you just be confident in your world, in your mind, in your heart? A negative version of that, the opposite of that, would be arrogant, right? I'm just full of myself, and I think I'm the hottest thing since sliced bread. Like this is like I'm on top of it. And then water would be what we call like the scientific element. It's like science. We call it's analytical and scientific thinking. Somebody who likes to think through things. That would be a characteristic of that type of individual. For positivity, negative water would be someone who like daydreams all the time. They're always thinking of ideas, but they can never quite seem to get them out into the world. They're more comfortable just sitting somewhere, just dreaming of things and doing it. Also, it could be related to maybe the person is doing stuff, but they don't care who they hurt in the process, right? So maybe I'm a scientist mindset. I like to analyze, come up with solutions for problems in a healthy way. That would be good. But then there's also the bad way, where I don't care who dies or who gets hurt or what I got to do to make this thing happen. This idea I got in my mind, I'm just going to do it. So they're quality thinkers. They can think through things, but then they don't care about how they get to their end, So they'll do whatever to get to that end, and that would be a negative water. Fire is one that always gets really mixed up in our culture, because people like to think of fire as aggression, and negative fire can be aggressive, but positive fire is passion. And when you meet a person who has quality passion, man, it'll set you on. We have words for it in our lingo.
Fire.
It'll set you on fire.
Right.
You'll feel that burning desire. We have
Right.
all these like phrases, right?
I'm
So
feeling it now talking to you.
well, thank you. And so you feel that coming off of them, and that's what it is. It's that
Right.
passion to bring forth and do things and be connected. And so, like comedians are and speakers and stuff tend to be very fire minded sometimes because they can connect with the people. It's this connection. And I like to tell my students, especially the young ones, because they don't always have the experiences to understand passion and things of that nature. So I'll say, like, have you ever been around a warm fire? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, did you talk with your friends and you're cooking your s'mores or your cheeseburgers and everybody's having fun? Now imagine a raging fire like what's going on in California right now. That's not something you want to be around cooking s'mores or whatever. You're running in the opposite direction,
Right.
just hoping
Right.
that you
Right.
survive this thing. So that would be the positive and the negative of the
Right.
fire. It's like positive fire, warm, inviting, bringing you in, making you inspired, helping you, making you want to connect with people. Negative fire, you're running out of there. You're getting away from that thing. It's super scary. And we all know, for us adults, we know people like that, right? The people, they're coming to the party. Okay, well, it's time for me to go. They're coming to the gathering. Okay, well, it's time for me to go. That person is just, they could be very toxic. So you don't even want to be around them,
Right. Right.
but a positive fire person, they're coming to the party and you're like, oh, that person's going to be there. Okay, let me come on over. I want to hang out with that person, so that would be it. And wind would be wind is what we call the service element of service. It's freedom. It's this ability to serve where you are needed the most, right? And you need a certain level of freedom to be able to do that, to be able to serve in these different things. Now, negative wind would be flighty, the person who you can't get to commit to anything. Hey, it might be a person you want to date. Hey, do you have let's go out on Friday. I'm not sure. Okay, well, let's go out on Saturday. I'm not sure about that. Okay, well, what works for you? I don't know. I'll get back to you. And then they never call you, And so you're like, whoa, I can't lock this person down for
Right.
anything. Hey, I need somebody to help me paint. Okay, well, I'll try to be there. Can you just give me a time because I need to know to
Yeah,
make sure I got the
exactly.
paint equipment. I'm not really sure. That would be that negative wind person. They're
Right.
just kind of all over the place and they can't really keep focus on this particular aspect. And so that would be it. Now, void, which is the last one. From the void, all of the elements kind of emerge, and to the void, all the elements return. Right. So this
Right.
idea that if you are once you get to this highest level as a void mentality, you are able to go to any place and be in any environment and see how you can best be successful in that environment and how that environment can best be successful and become the element that is needed for that environment to be successful. Because, for instance, if you're a fire person and that's passion and connection, and then you get on a job and your boss is a fire person and their passion and connection, well, the boss, their ideas and their passion, unless they're asking you for your opinion and want your help with it, their ideas kind of take precedent, right?
Right. Right.
So you always coming up, well, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, but I would rather it be this way because I think this is going to really serve the people. And the boss is looking at you like, that's not your call. This is my call, not your
Right.
call. And
Right. Of
now
course.
you creating conflict.
Yes.
So when we look at the elements in nature, we say, well, what supports fire the most? Well, earth can support fire because it needs that fuel, right? And wind can support fire because it needs that oxygen to burn. So maybe I need to be the wind or I need to be earth
Right.
to help this fire person who's my boss
Right.
succeed the most in what they're doing. Now, it's not my normal element, but because I've mastered understanding the elements and how to bring them forth, I can convincingly become that for the purpose of serving the greater good at my office.
And
Yeah.
plus, you're somebody who can recognize these elements around you now, so you can interact with them.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so are the elements earth, wind, water, fire, ether, or void um, consistent with the ones that are associated with the months of the year and astrology and that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure about that.
Okay,
That's not something I've delved into deeply. I
interesting.
would say that what's interesting, because there are other, like the Chinese have
Mhm.
elements, and in India they have certain
Yeah,
elements.
Hindus, yeah.
Yeah, and so what you will find is that, a matter of fact, a lot of this, when you look at our traditions, a lot of it comes from India. And then it went to China and Tibet, and then it
Right,
made its way over
correct.
to Japan. And each peoples were able to kind of look at it from their perspective and spend time with it, and they made their changes on ways they felt that it was best. But it's kind of seems like it's coming from the same source. But then we took it and used, and people took it and changed it in ways that it was going to serve them best in that particular time. And so I wouldn't, I say all that to say that I wouldn't put it past that it might be some connection there. I just don't know what that is.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's come back to present day. What are you doing now? Tell us about the
So I,
excitement and the passion that's here now.
yeah, so thank you. I appreciate that. So um, I had started, so at my school, I teach these kids martial arts and self-defense and empowerment. And I started recognizing that these new animation characters were coming out, and like movie characters like Naruto and Boruto. And my kids would be running around and they'd be pretending like they were these ninja, and like they can do these mudra and shoot flames and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And I would talk to them and I'd say, hey, you could, there's some stuff in our system that talks about that. And they'd be like, oh yeah, show me something. And, and I'm like thinking to myself, well, huh. Well, the experiences that I had were, I moved to Ohio. I trained with my teacher out in the woods. I did a bunch of meditation, and and to tell a kid to spend 25 years doing that, they just don't want to hear it, So I was like, well, how do I come up with a way to help this youth explore this realm in a non-threatening way that's not going to interfere with maybe what their family spiritual beliefs are, anything like that. And I didn't really have an answer. And I remember my teacher saying, when he first came back from Japan, because the government was exploring remote viewing at the time, there was a guy named Dale Graff at Wright Pat Air Force Base, which wasn't very far from us,
Yeah, I
who
got to
reached
meet him.
yeah, he's a great guy, who reached out to him and said, hey, would you be interested in helping us with this program, or at least us studying you a little bit? So my teacher did some of that work and found that it really was, that this protocol really did work. And so I remember him telling me that story, and I was like, maybe I should look into remote viewing. And so I found this guy, Paul Smith, and I started training with him
Mhm.
and fell in love with it, and then started working with Tom McNair a little bit, and then Bill Ray. I did some stuff with him, and then I went to the Monroe Institute and did both of Joe McMonacle's courses, and just got a well-rounded understanding of what remote viewing was. And that kind of led me into, okay, well, perceiving things that I can't see, which led me to mind sight, which was extra-ocular vision, seeing without, your eyes.
Right.
And that related to one of the Kuji. So I was like, oh, this would be cool. So I delved into those protocols and trained with several different teachers in those
Wait,
systems.
before
Yes.
we move forward, sorry to interrupt you. You
Hmm.
mentioned a few things. You mentioned mind sight and you mentioned the remote viewers. And talk a little bit about mind sight for those who don't know what mind sight is, and
Yeah.
and then we'll come back to where you were.
Yeah, so mind sight is, or extraocular vision, it's got other names as well, as your ability to see or sense things without the use of your eyes. But primarily, at the greatest level, it's seeing without your eyes. So even though your eyes are covered with mask and with, tape and stuff like that, you're still able to perceive objects in your surrounding. And we know about things like echolocation and stuff, and humans have been able to do that. But this is your ability to actually see without your eyes. And so, one of the things that these different teachers have brought about in these practices is ways to help you do that. And so that's what and faster protocols to help you understand that. And some people do it through recognizing that maybe the pineal gland is engaged with sending and receiving, energy from the room, or sensing vibrations in the room, and then understanding those vibrations as a particular language that identifies particular items, and then your brain can perceive it. Just like we look at something, and that's a wave spectrum, and we see what that item is, and because we have a language cortex and definitions in our brain, we say that's a cup, but it's not. We're looking at a vibration as it's going into our eyes and being translated into information, which then gets tagged to a memory of a name, and then we know what to call it. So, some teachers say that there is that same way to do that, but through the pineal gland. Other teachers I train with say that it's like your higher self is actually looking at these items, and you're tapping into the higher self, and then the higher self's eyes is what you're actually looking through. And, regardless, they all have success, both, but, these different camps, regardless of what they think the mechanism is, they're all have students who are able to see without their eyes, which is powerful. And so,
Absolutely.
and that to me that those type of modalities are great because they allow youth, especially in our modern day, who we are actually, it seems like losing more and more to technology, can then have faith and belief in their own individual technology. Absolutely. and really have fun exploring that, because it's right now it's a lot more fun to put on virtual reality than it is to actually be in real reality. Right. So, but if I could have a virtual reality type experience in my real reality as a young person, that probably would be pretty appealing and fun, Absolutely. And regardless of what people want to say, fun is appealing to all peoples, so we like to have fun, so if you can make things fun, that's it. So that led me to, well, now when I go and train, I'm looking around and I see late 30s, it's sometimes maybe an occasional 20-year-old or early 30-year-old, but normally it's late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and that's it. We don't see any teenagers or kids or any of that business training in these things. One, probably because it's expensive, but two, I don't know if it's exciting to them. And so I started saying, well, if we have a lot of the people who've done the research, the veterans, they're transitioning out in the next several years,
Right.
And then we have these young kids who are coming up, but they don't have any connection to this understanding. Then we may lose the potential or actually the momentum that we have to start building this. And so how do we bring these youth together with strong mentors who've been doing it, just like in the old tribal days, right? The mom and dad were out hunting and doing stuff, and the elders were teaching the youth. And then at some point, the youth would get old enough that they connected back with, and started doing more stuff with mom and dad, but they had that foundation from the elders. So how do we link the elders with the youth, and then have the people in the middle also get engaged? And through a series of like one download, and then all these major reminders, as I kept saying, no, that can't be me. That's too big. Nobody has done it like this. Like if it could be done, somebody would have did it already. Blah blah blah.
I know that.
And the universe just kept saying, nope, it's you. Nope, it's you. Nope, it's you. And then finally, I was like, okay, I think this might be my thing. I have to go out there and try to do it. And the Psi Games was born. And the Psi Games, this will be the first one that's happening in August 1st to 3rd in Charlottesville, Virginia, where we celebrate and explore through a fun, tournament style way, psychic abilities. And so whether you have psychic abilities, you're really great at them, or you're not sure what you have or how to even get involved in it, we'll have something there for you. So it's not just the competition, but it's also learning lectures and workshops from people who've been
Right.
doing this and researchers who've been researching this for many, many years. Um, and then it's also these games. So we have fun and we build community and
Wow.
we have collaboration
Right.
amongst those who can do, those who research, and those who can do and research. So
Right.
we're bringing
Right.
them all together so that we can have this
Absolutely.
unity. And my hopes are that if a child who learns mindsight when they're young, they have now a community to go to continue to grow that skill. Because right now we don't have that. So what happens if you talk to a lot of people in these different fields is they'll always say, "Oh yeah, my child could do that when they were 10, but then they decided they didn't want to do it anymore, and now they're 20 and they don't know how to do it. They've
Right.
lost that ability." And that's because what incentive is there? A matter
Right.
of fact, they'll probably have more incentive to not do it because many of the communities that they're going to get involved in are going to say that's woo woo,
Yes, exactly.
crazy stuff. We don't do that. You can't do that.
Right.
But if we had built a community for them to feel comfortable coming to and actually exploring
Right.
these skills,
Yeah.
then probably we'd see these skills take off.
Yes.
And that's what the Psi Games is.
That's amazing. That's amazing. When I was, I don't know, about 10 years back, I was thinking along those lines, but I had the same thoughts you did.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Jeffrey Mishloff from New Thinking Aloud, he also, when I first approached him with it, he said, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, I thought about doing the same thing, but he's like, it didn't seem like it had a lot of momentum, and it seemed like when the remote viewing program came out, it was going to this parapsychology field was going to take off, and then all of a sudden it was squashed,
Yeah.
and it didn't take off. And so he was like, then it wasn't the time. He was like, but I now see or feel that there's the time. And if you look at what's happening in the news right now, we have government people coming out straight up saying with no caveat, yes, there are non-human intelligences,
Yes, yes.
and we have these psionic assets that can actually communicate with these things and like bring them around, and which makes you think, right? They said
Yeah.
for years the remote viewing program in the military was cut off. We don't do that anymore. And now you have these guys like, yeah, we have these remote viewing and psionic assets. And it's like, wait a
Yeah, I
minute.
know 10 years ago when I took my remote viewing course and I told people about it, they thought I was crazy, but now, people are seeking these kind of things.
Yeah, because they are the bridge between, and here's another personal feeling on this. We we have disclosure now. It's been so many people to come out to say that this is real, blah blah blah. But still, maybe our communication or our ability to really believe that and know that is still kind of choked off a little bit. And the way we get past that is that if you're saying remote viewing and these different skill sets allow us to have some sort of engagement, then maybe the way is to go in to really filter and grow this ability, so then nobody can stand there's no middleman between our communication,
Correct.
right? And no one to tell me what the NHI thinks or how it feels or whatever else. We can actually tap into that and feel that.
Right.
So the
Right.
more people we start teaching the language that's inherent within them, which is this deeper consciousness, to be able to tap into the field and decipher what's happening there, the more likely we're going to have a greater potential of communication and the potential for us to actually grow our communication with these beings, right?
Right.
And that's kind of I think that also is for all mankind. So I think the Psi Games helps us do that. And I think the other, people, especially in the spiritual communities, I understand in energetic that competition as a word kind of sounds bad to people, like, and that's just because I believe this is just me, my small opinion in a huge world, that our culture tells us that it's bad because in our culture, and this kind of like our capitalistic, like, push to the next level, do these things. Sometimes our culture can kind of make this competition, like in football games and rugby games, like you suck and I'm great, like, and if you can't beat me, you suck,
Yeah.
and that type of thing, versus saying, this high five, like, hey, good game. You did great.
Yeah.
Like, you showed me something that I didn't even think was possible.
Right.
Can
Right.
you teach me how to do that and
Yeah.
help me do that?
Yeah.
That type of competition and collaboration
Absolutely.
where we end that engagement and I recognize it and I'm inspired by you, not
Right.
hate you and want to,
Right.
see you fail, and
Beautiful.
so we can have that and still be okay. It's
Yeah.
just who's building the culture. And
Right.
so it's very important to me that if you look at the Psi Games website, that all of the people who are there are people of this beautiful, they're warriors, or if you don't like the word warriors, they are harbingers and bringers of the light.
Yeah.
They are holders and carriers of the torch of goodness. And so these people are people who are there to help us create an environment that's safe, that's fun, that makes people feel inspired, that brings people to new levels of what's possible. And that really is the type of, collaboration and what we call competition that I'm looking for. And that's what I hope the Psi Games can do is we find out what a standard is for like remote viewing, and
Yeah.
we see, oh man, this guy is like the next Joe McMonagle, like
Exactly.
he's
Exactly.
like doing stuff nobody thought was possible. Like, and
Exactly.
now you have 1,000 people go home feeling like I'm inspired to go remote view now.
Well,
Who's in my
there
area?
needs to be some structure, right? There needs to be some
Mm-hmm.
form of competency. There needs to be some form of bringing everyone together to decide, first of all, what the benchmark is, so that we can build on that benchmark too.
Exactly. And here's a perfect example that goes along with what you're saying. So one of the individuals that's part of the Psi Games, his name is Nelson. He's a 6-time memory world champion, right? So this guy is like, he can memorize all strings of, things some of us can't even fathom, he's doing it. And he said that when he first started getting into memory championships about 10 years ago, he said, or so, um, because it was so new of a thing, like they weren't really sure what the benchmarks were. Right. So they would come up with a competition or a challenge, and then everybody would play the challenge. And one of them was like memorizing a deck of cards. So they didn't have a number on how fast that was. So
Right.
they had the first few people compete, and then the fastest of that group, they said, well, this is the number. It's 60 seconds or whatever. So anyway, they got down to like 30 seconds was the fastest, and that nobody could beat that for like a couple years, right? 30 seconds was it. It was like everybody was like either 32 or 33, but nobody could beat 30. And a couple years ago, somebody beat it, and they got down to like 24 seconds or something like that.
Wow.
So then what happened the next year? The next year, all of these people who compete every year who could not beat 30 are now hitting
Oh,
like
no,
27.
24, 20.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
I
like
know.
27, 26. They're like right
Yeah.
there. But now 30 is past. Like,
Yeah.
that's good, but that's not where we
Yeah. So
are.
we've gotten past that.
Yes. And then
That's how.
lastly, just recently, he said somebody finally made it to 15 seconds. So they
Wow.
can memorize a deck of cards in 15 seconds consistently, and and now that's the new standard. So they identified a benchmark, then they beat it, then people were inspired, they went home and
But that
trained and
affects
worked
all of
on it.
humanity then, right?
Yes.
Because the one individual that can do that affects his circle around it, and that
Yes.
consciousness now evolves to another level of affecting all of us.
Yes, exactly, exactly, and that's the hope. And we can have 1,000 people in a room at the Psi Games, and all of them walk away inspired and know what the new possibilities are. And each one of those individuals go out and touch their own inner circle or their circle where they are. They're raising the consciousness field everywhere.
Right.
That has far-reaching potential.
Wow.
If we equate what happens energetically and consciously to a virus, right, and how fast a virus can spread around the world, then definitely we're going to have it. And when it gets into the consciousness field of what's possible, it's going to change the paradigm. It's going to change and shape everyone. And now we'll have people coming out of the woodworks, that we didn't even know, or they didn't even know they had these abilities or what to call them. They just thought it
Right.
was, they thought they were going crazy. Oh yeah,
Right.
I knew that this person was going to say that before. And then they see maybe a clip of the Psi Games or something like it, and they say, oh, that's what I've been doing this whole time.
Right. Right.
Maybe next year
Absolutely.
I'll go there and I'll try that out.
Absolutely. That was the whole premise of Metaphysical Hub too, that I would interview these people that have all these abilities and increase the awareness in the world of what's possible out there, right? And
Hmm.
it doesn't matter what the label is. The point is that we all get to know each other and know each other of what's possible and build on it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And especially children. Like I was watching videos the other day of children in China and all that they can do and all what's possible and how they've been taught all these years, in a school environment, these things.
Hmm.
Whereas we're so behind in that way
Yes,
in the
yes.
West.
Yeah, yeah. So real, so true. And I think, it's our, we just need more communities that really bring this together. And the Psi Games, when you look at the Psi Games on the website, is Psi Games International. We have people coming from Germany, and we have people coming from the
Good
UK.
stuff.
We have people coming from Spain and from Mexico. So now, not only are we just showing the people in the United States what's amazing, but no, we're trying to bring people from all over the place.
That's
So we
excellent.
raise consciousness on a global scale
That's excellent.
right now at this event. Like that's the goal right there.
Well, I'm excited for you for your first Psi Games and to share it with everyone in our community. Our community isn't that big, but it's growing exponentially as time progresses, and I'm sure we'll be able to collaborate here at some point and you know work together to see how we can build the Psi Games vision, I guess is the word.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. And yeah, I have a great feeling and about it, and everyone who gets engaged with it has a great feeling about it. And so I really believe this is the time, and with people like yourself really helping to push forward the efforts, and it's time now.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm excited for you and I'm excited for Psi Games and I'm excited to see what's possible and who shows up there and what they're able to do. And now this is in August.
Yeah, so it's August 1st through the 3rd in Charlottesville, Virginia. We have, well, not only do we have keynote speakers like Chris Bledsoe and Danny Sheehan and Tom Campbell from, My Big Toe and Adam Curry, but we also have a whole host of other lecturers like Diane Powell, not David Powell, Diane Powell from the Telepathy Tapes, who will be speaking and teaching. And we have people teaching mindsight and different skills like that. It's just going to be incredible.
Is it
Um,
is
Go ahead.
there a prerequisite to being there? Is there an age limit to being there?
Yeah, so we have, you can bring someone who's about 15 or younger. About actually, we our youth competition. So we have adult and youth divisions, and our youth division starts at 7. So you can bring, as long as you're with a parent, you can bring somebody who's 7, and they can be with you. The way the games are is that we have a team version and a individual version. So the team version is 5 teams of 5. So if you can come up with 4 other people besides yourself, and the genres, the competition genres are remote viewing, mind sight, psychokinesis, precognition, and dowsing. So one person from that team who the team decides, hey, you do really good at remote viewing. I want you to be in the remote viewing competitions. They will choose that individual and they will compete. And that each individual will get, based on their performance, will get a certain number of points, and then that points will go to the overall team.
Right.
Now, if you're somewhere and you're like, man, I've been practicing remote viewing, but I'm pretty isolated where I live and I don't have a team, then that's great. We have an individual competition as well. So then you can choose to compete in as many of those genres as you feel comfortable. So if you're one individual, if you're competing in the individual competitions, you can choose remote viewing and dowsing if you're really good at that, and not compete in the other ones. And then, the same thing, you'll get a certain number of points, and then whoever gets the highest points wins at the end. So we have a youth division and an adult division for both of those, and you can fill it out and be a part of it. And if you're just wanting to come to be a participant and learn and then watch, you can do that too. We have tickets that people can get. And I'll send you a discount link for if you want to share it to anybody who's watching this,
Absolutely. I'll
so
do
that they
that.
can get
Sure.
it, and they can. It's a 20% off discount link, so it's a pretty hefty amount of money.
Yeah. Fair
So
enough. Yeah.
it allows people to come and explore this with us and support this effort to bring forth this amazing event to so many.
We'll make you a feature the next interview so that we get you out there.
Oh man, that'd be beautiful. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I'm excited for you. And so I've kind of exhausted my questions, and we learned so much from you, and we learned so much about what's coming and what's possible. Now let me ask you, what do you want to share with the audience? You already shared about what's happening right now. So what's a message you want to give the audience that maybe I haven't asked or haven't thought to ask, or
Hmm.
something that you want to leave them with?
That's a great question. I think I think for all of us who are listening to this, you know, there's as we talked about the elements earlier, right? The elements are about balance. And 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 the whole idea behind the ninja was about seeking balance. So even if you are an earth personality person, you still have to, it was about seeking the balance of all the other elements within
Yeah.
yourself and really being able to do that. So right now, if you look at the news and you're reviewing things in that light, it can be pretty daunting. It feels like we're overwhelmed with so much negativity and so much destruction and so much pain. And that's there. Nobody can deny that that's there. But that's not all that's there.
Right.
You know,
Right.
there's a balance to it. There is, in that same vein, we are also hearing non-human intelligence contact. We're hearing that we're really exploring UAPs. We're hearing about people with abilities that we thought were just woo-woo and didn't exist. We
Mm-hmm.
have access to these things, and we have access to this knowledge. And so if we want to see change and we want to see the positive grow, then we have to be the change that we want to see, which means we have to unite. So not just for the Psi Games, but things like the Psi Games, I would invite people to want to find how they can get involved in these things to help us raise that awareness, to help us keep doing our part as these light bringers in the world, so that we can, if not balance out, maybe the scale tips a little higher on the bright side, so, and
Absolutely.
and we can really move things into that dynamic. But we do it together as a collective,
Mm-hmm.
and we do it by getting together in these places as much as possible, where we can celebrate and we can be a community, unified towards us growing our multidimensional nature as human beings.
Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed our interview, and it was an honor to interview you and learn about your journey. And looking forward to having a deeper conversation with you next time, maybe diving a little deeper into into Psi Games and this the idea of ninjutsu maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know whenever you want, and we can go down any of these rabbit holes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I love it. I love it. So thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was fun. Thank you.